Hello viewers, today we're going to be working on a Lasko 3733 box the fan. This is a vintage one. This is dated 2000 to 2001. Has a Marco motor. So this was a very late instance of this configuration. This is in pretty bad shape. This is going to be quite the challenge to repair and restore. The motor is completely locked up. And it looks like somebody put grease in at least the rear bearing from what I've seen thus far. So we got to do some kind of preliminary investigation here to see what we're going to have to do to get this apart. So first we're going to take off the guards. My main concern here is getting the blade off of the motor because the blade is starting to sun rot, or maybe moisture rot, I don't know. It's plastic decaying. And so we're not going to be able to put a lot of force on the blade to remove it from the motor like we normally could. And since the motor is not operational, trying to open up the motor is also going to be a little bit more difficult because we can't clean the... well, actually, I guess we could slide the rear shell off the back and that wouldn't damage anything. We can't slide the front shaft, the front bearing off the shaft until we get the motor to run so we can clean up the shaft. And I'll explain why later. So here's the inside of the guard. You can see there's a yellowing line on here. That's kind of interesting, where it was not exposed to the air. So maybe this was moisture, maybe it was the smoking, I don't know. But there's something awful on here. Alright, so the blade, it turns, but it's extremely stiff. This is not going to work. And this is the problem here with the decay. You can kind of see the blades are chipped up at the top edge there. This is kind of breaking off. It's not too bad, it seems to be just the very edge, but it is a problem. It doesn't seem to be like that on the leading edge, just the trailing edge, which is kind of weird. Very odd decay going on here. And I've seen one or two of these blades break down like this, but only newer models. I have not seen one from this era break down like this. So that's kind of an unfortunate situation here. I doubt this is going to pull off with any ease, but let's see. Actually, it's coming off. Huh. Well, I guess you got to get lucky sometimes. That's interesting. Okay. So the blade came right off. That was the part I was most concerned about, so that's good. Can deal with anything else from there. I think this was definitely cleaned at some point. Usually when people clean fans, this is the part that gets missed. This is usually a very good indicator of how many hours it has. And you can see this is pretty well caked. So I think this was definitely cleaned, perhaps even a couple times throughout its life. And this is probably a very, very high hours unit. So again with the dust, actually let's take the rear guard off. Oops. A lot of times people also miss cleaning inside the motor, which is actually very easy. A couple blasts of compressed air will get it very thoroughly cleaned for the most part, unless it's some kind of a sticky, like kitchen oil, cooking grease and so forth. That's harder to get out, but regular household dust usually will come right out of the motor with a good blast of compressed air. This motor is pretty well caked up with dust. These guards are pretty bad too. Those will go right in the dishwasher. That should make easy work of that. So let's take a closer look at this motor. You can see the dust pattern where the grill was. So this has definitely put in some hours since the last service interval on this. and you can see it's really caked with dust. And this is typically the only thing that causes these types of motors to fail, is this overload of dust, because the air stops passing through the motor and it has no cooling. So if you look at the back of the shaft here, it looks like there's grease in there, and that is wrong. There should not be grease in a sleeve bearing. It is possible that's just really dried up, really poor quality oil, but I don't think so. That looks like grease to me. So that's bad. We're going to have to clean that out. That bearing, so these are sintered bearings on this fan, and most fans are like this. So the bearing has kind of microscopic holes in the unit, and there's a felt-like material that goes around the bearing and holds oil. And during operation, through heat cycles and so forth, the oil sitting inside the felt will pass through those microscopic holes onto the bearing, into the center of the bearing, onto the shaft, and kind of be like a continuous lubrication cycle almost. And when you put grease or the wrong type of oil in there, it clogs up those microscopic holes, and you have to go through a bearing burning process to clear that out. I don't normally go through that process. This one might be so bad that we'll have to. There are a couple other people that have, actually no, there's only one other person I'm aware of that has a video of that process. On the front, it doesn't look like there's anything in the bearing, and surprisingly, this is very clean. This is what I was talking about before, by needing to turn the motor on to remove this front part, because we need to slide this bearing over the shaft, and the shaft is dirty. You don't want to slide this over any kind of dirt. So we got to get the motor freed up so I can polish this surface here and then be able to slide the bearing off. I've never seen a sticker like that on the inside of the motor. That is a typical Lasko looking sticker. It's not something that normally goes on the motor though. Now let's see if we can get this to free up with a couple drops of oil. I don't think so, but it's worth the shot. I'm assuming the back bearing is where the problem is. I can barely even turn this to get the oil to go in there. Try a couple, oh, rats. I just made a mess on the floor here on the table. That's really dried up pretty bad. It's not going to do anybody any good here. I'm almost completely certain that's grease. So this is an excellent example why you don't put grease in sleeve bearings, because this is what will happen over time. Really hoping this oil will seep in here and get this freed up just enough so I can run this for a couple minutes just to polish the shaft. It's starting to free up a little bit. I also really don't like turning this in this condition. Yeah, it's getting a lot better. But it's still got a ways to go. I think the problem is definitely in the back. I figured it would be. Looking like that. That's pretty bad. Okay, now it's starting to free up. Okay, I'd be willing to bet it'll run now. Let's see if we can get it to run. Duh. Stupid. If you turn it on, it might work. Actually, it doesn't sound too bad. Okay, so it's gonna work. Let's take this bearing back, or this bearing, take the blade back off. And then what I want to do is get this area all cleaned up. So we'll try to just clean it a little bit with a towel. And if it doesn't clean up all the way, we'll use some, which is probably not going to, we'll use some sanding paper. We'll use some relatively fine grit sanding paper. Yeah, definitely some rust on there. This unit definitely has seen some action over the years, no doubt about it. Someone tried to service it, but did not do it correctly. It's kind of an odd wear pattern on there. This is not even enough to clean it off. I might have to go to something with a coarser grit. This is usually good enough. Okay, let's go up a little bit. This is chipping away at it now, but it's taking some time. There we go. Now I'll go back to our finer grit paper. Make sure this is nice and smoothed off. This is a very important step because if you don't do this, the bearing can get scored as you take it off. Okay, they look pretty good now. Nice clean surface. No rust. It feels pretty smooth all the way through. Let's see if we can get this motor to come apart now. This is 1/4 inch bolts. And it just threads into the back of the motor housing, the motor shell. Very easy to work on, no nuts to deal with or anything like that. I quite like these motors. Okay, so we need this top shell to separate from the bottom shell, and we're going to have to give it a little bit of convincing. Okay, so what's happened is the opposite of what we wanted. The stator has separated from the bottom shell. We want it to separate from the top shell. There we go. That's what we wanted. So this, if this is properly clean, this will pull off with no resistance. If it meets resistance, you got to stop. But that was good. It come right off. So that's fine. Look at how much dust was caked in there. This is really a high hours unit. That's a lot of dust. Wow. Okay. And there's your greasy mess on the rear. This is why you don't put grease or detergent oil into sleeve bearings. Detergent oil will turn to this kind of consistency over time. So I can't say if this was grease or oil, but the amount of it that was on there leads me to believe that it was probably grease. Oh, this whole thing has already got pretty hot. You do have to work pretty fast when you're doing this cleaning, because these shaded pole motors do run very hot, or you got to just get some air over it for cooling. Okay, so now we want to remove all the guts from this frame. I want to take the handle off, which is a very, very risky procedure, but we have to do it. I want to take the switch off, which is also very risky. And we've got to get all the electrical components out of here, because that motor is going to need some serious work. There's not really a good way to do this other than very carefully. So what we're up against here is this has to slide this direction and then push up. But these tabs here will prevent it from coming in this direction. So we have to kind of flex the handle down a bit to get this to come up, and then move it over, and that's when it usually breaks. But I will see if I can get it very, very carefully so that it doesn't break. I have removed many of these handles with good success, but then sometimes they do break. Okay, we got half of it off, but that does not mean that we're in the clear, because the same issue exists on the other side here. Okay, we got the whole thing off without it breaking. You can tell it's got that brittle, kind of brittle sound to it. So there's that. The switch apparatus is also kind of difficult to deal with. The switch have 3 tabs on the inside here, which are very, very brittle and delicate, and they have to kind of push down and then out. And these break more often than the handle does, but you don't see them broken as often because most people don't ever try to remove the switch. The handle can kind of just break during normal operation, unfortunately. If I recall correctly, the switch will not come off by itself. It's part of the, like it's larger than this plastic indicator thing on the outside. Yeah, I think that's what we're running into right now. So, I have to try to get this out. I'm trying to put most of the force not on the tab, but on this part. I'm trying to move the tab down by moving this part down, because the tab is just going to break if you try to exert any force on it. Okay, I got one tab through, and let's see if I get that out of there. Okay, cool. I got it without it breaking. And now this kind of turns to come out. Just very typical. Just turns. Was a little difficult to get it started, but that's it. I'm going to temporarily put this back on because we don't want anything here to get scratched. I don't want the windings to get nicked or scratched up during this process of removing the motor from the frame. So now we have 4 Phillips screws holding the motor onto the frame. And then we have some sticky stuff over here that keeps the wire down. So this would just kind of peel off. Yeah, I don't know what this was exposed to, but it was very destructive, whatever it was. That is a color I have never seen this stuff turn. Very strange. I'm going to say this is not only stored in a harsh environment, but it was probably used in one too. Okay, so now the motor is detached from the frame, and the electrical components are almost completely detached from the frame, sans the strainer leaf down here, which just kind of comes out like that. So now we can fully separate all the electrical components from the frame for cleaning. So we'll take this over to the cleaning area and we'll wash that off. And I think we're going to throw the guards in the dishwasher now. Get a good picture of what these guards look like before we wash them. It's quite dirty. Unfortunately, these are kind of warped. It's just, it is what it is. Nothing I can really do about that. And here's the back one. Also quite dirty on both sides. It's just absolutely filthy. I think I'll put the bottom guard on the bottom rack because it's a little bit dirtier. And then we'll have to put the top one in the top rack, or the rear one in the top rack, I guess. Well, it might clean okay like that, or I might have to run it twice. I don't know. we'll see. I wonder if I should just preemptively run it twice, because this is so bad. I think I'm going to do that. I think I'll just run it twice. Because if you don't get good water flow, then the thing doesn't clean evenly and thoroughly. So we'll just have to run it twice. For the time saved and agony saved of washing every slat manually, it is well worth doing. Alright, so put in some soap. This is the store brand soap. It works fine. It is kind of clogged. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Okay, I hope that got caught on video. And then I think what really does most of the work is the TSP. We're going to put a lot of TSP in here. Okay, now we're going to turn this on and go do something else while it does the work. Why this is not okay. And I like to run the hot water for a minute to get the water hot. This time of year the water is so cold coming in off the streets, so I'll run the hot water until it comes out hot over here. Okay, it's coming out hot. The water heater's in the same room, so it goes pretty quick. And now we're going to turn it on to pots and pans. And we're going to put on power scour. And you can't see that. And then we're going to shut off heated dry, because we don't want to put any more heat in there than is necessary for the cleaning. And we'll begin. Okay, the first one should be ready. Oh, look at that. All that yellow junk came right off of there. Well, most of it. That looks so much better than it did before. So we have that compared to this. There's the yellow side. Quite the difference. And that's why I said to get this result, even if I have to run it twice and use, more soap and more electricity and more hot water, it's worth it, because the outcome of this is phenomenal. So I'm going to wash the second one now, and then we should have two guards, other than the warpage, look like new. I'm not worried about this warpage. The screws will kind of hold it back in place once I get it on the frame. Whoops, almost dropped the camera. Alright, now let's take a look at the motor. And that is probably the worst case of bearing mess up I've ever seen. Just black in there. That's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be silver. Wow. That is really bad. Well, let's start with some cleaning. Get some of the big chunks of dust off. And then we can work on things a little better here. And see, the dust is coming off the wire here very clean, so I don't think that this was like in a kitchen or something, because if all that yellow stuff on the guard was kitchen grease, this would be sticky as well, and this is perfectly clean. So it probably was just in a damp environment or something for storage, because even if it was in the smoking, again, this would be very sticky, and it's not. So we got to get this back opened up. Wow. That's pretty bad. That is very high hours. But it is a fairly easy to clean, like household style dust. It's not overly sticky or anything, which is unusual to be accompanied with that very yellowish color. Not the worst I've seen, but it's up there. Yeah, see how easily that's coming off? It's very unusual that you have this dry, non-sticky dust when it's got that color to it. Ordinarily, I would just take this outside and blast it with compressed air, but it's too cold today, so I wanted to vacuum as much of it off as I can. Now I'll blast what's left with the compressed air. Alright, now the windings are pretty clean. I don't like to do that part in the house, but I don't like freezing even less than I like spraying dust in the house. Alright, so now we'll have to go outside, unfortunately, still to do the varnishing because we can't spray that in the house. It's a health hazard. But that's fine, it's quick. So as you can see on this stator, there's a lot of very loose wires. Get a closer shot of that. And we're going to focus. Focus. There we go. All these wires are very loose here. That's not good. Because all this stuff has the ability to vibrate now while it's running. And when it vibrates, over time the insulation can wear off these wires, and then you get a short in the motor, and then it has to be rewound. So you really don't want to have those loose wires like that. When we spray this with the varnish, it'll kind of like glue all this in place, and this won't be an issue anymore. See, the majority of these coils have loose wires on. This wire here in the back is loose. This one's not too bad. These motors were definitely built down to a cost. There are a lot of cheap elements to them, but if you take care of them, they will hold up. And quite frankly, they hold it to a lot of abuse as well. Alright, so we got to do some serious cleaning here to this, to these bearings. These bearings are in pretty bad condition. So we'll just start by wiping everything out. And we might have to burn these bearings to clean them up. I don't know. We'll have to see how it works in the coming weeks after we do this. The other thing I might try, just because this is so bad, I've never done this before, but I might try to put some Simichrome polish inside the bearing and then slip the shaft back in and let it run for a minute. I don't know if that's really a good idea or not. I don't think that polish is strong enough to really take out a significant amount of the surface area. I don't know. This is just so dirty, I'm not sure. I guess at bare minimum we got to clean it with some isopropyl alcohol as well. And this is just awful in here. It really looks like grease with the amount of stuff that's just caked on around the outside. I don't think that just oil would have done this. I think this is grease. I've never seen so much accumulation on the outside of the bearing like that. Wow, that is just so bad. I think I'm going to get the isopropyl alcohol now, actually. Isopropyl alcohol. Well, it's cleaning up better than I expected. It's looking decent inside. It's looking a lot cleaner. I still think that the porous aspect of the bearings is likely clogged, but time will tell how it runs. We'll be able to tell. We can at least get it in good condition now and get it to last a couple weeks to be used through Christmas time. Then we can revisit it in the spring, and we can do the deeper bearing cleanout procedure then if need be. That's coming out looking like engine oil. It's not supposed to. Wow, that is just terrible. I think I'm going to try putting some Simichrome polish in there and see what happens. I did seem to get a fair bit more junk off of her. I wonder if what would happen if we just put some in there in both bearings and then reassemble it and let it run for a minute. Would that take the place of having to polish it manually? I feel like it was that obvious somebody would have discovered that by now. Let's see. can kind of hear like the grittiness of the polish working. So maybe this will work. I'm just going to let it run for a minute like that. See if that does any good. I don't think it should run like this for too long because it is going to be taking off, you know, very microscopic layers of the surface, but you should do a little bit more. I can definitely hear the grittiness of the polish working. Yeah, it definitely did a lot of cleaning in there for sure. It's going from that to that. It's better. It still has a ways to go. Yeah, I feel like we got a really good like mirror finish on there already. Huh. Now I'll turn the shaft in the drill press as well, but I feel like this is interesting because now we've got some polish on we did some polishing to the actual bearing surface as well, not just the shaft. That's the back, that's the front. And those things are totally caked as well. Everything in here was just caked. Whatever was done, it seems to have only been done to the rear bearing, because the front bearing is nowhere near as bad as this. This is still sticky. I'm gonna have to like just soak this in the Isoprisol for a little while, I think. Okay, there's that one. See if we can get these bearings cleaned out now. See if any more junk comes out of there. I think we will find more junk comes out. Yep. Looks decent inside now. It's kind of what it should look like. It should be silver. What do y'all think? Is that a good idea or not? I kind of feel like it is. Alright, that's looking pretty good now. I'm going to give this one a second dosing because this was the worst of the two bearings. Liquid spill. Still getting a lot of junk out of there. Alright, now we're coming out pretty clean. Okay, that's better. Not too worried about the cosmetics of the inside of this. You don't see it, it doesn't really matter. As long as you got good airflow, that's what's important. See if this is ready to come clean now. No, this is still pretty bad. Wow. Huh, this is not coming clean at all. I'll keep chipping away at this off the video. Here's the second guard out of the dishwasher. It's clean. It doesn't look as good as the front guard does because this is significantly more yellowed. But it's clean and usable now, and that's what I'm mostly interested in. It is kind of odd, now that this is cleaned up, I can really see the yellowing pattern. It's odd how it's only in a concentrated area down here, but not so much over here, not at the top. That's really kind of unusual. This is hours later, so I kind of forget where I had left off before, but so maybe this is redundant. But I cleaned this thrust washer as best as I could. I cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol, and I cleaned it with melamine foam, and I lastly cleaned it with some dishwashing soap and warm water, and that was the best attempt out of the three. I've got it pretty clean now. It's still not perfect, but it's as good as it's going to get. If I find that it's still kind of sticky or creating drag, we'll just have to replace it because I can't get it to come perfectly clean. So now what's left to do is we are going to go over to the cleaning area, and we're going to try to clean out these motor shells to make them look a little more presentable, especially the back one at least. And then we'll clean up the cord, and we'll clean up the handle and the switch, and then we'll also have to clean up the frame. It is winter time, and the air in the house is dry, and my hands are getting raw, so I'm going to use the chemical gloves to prevent my hands from getting wet and dried a whole bunch of times during this process, which will just make the skin dry out issue even worse. I'll plug in my little Christmas tree here so we can enjoy that. Alright, so let's see if we can get this to clean up a little better. I don't know why the heck we have so many pieces of melamine foam here. The letter H was here a couple of days ago, and I feel like he just used 1 million pieces of melamine foam and just left them all here dirty. This says 1228 on the top and 0262 on the bottom. That is a Lasko looking sticker, but I've never seen one placed on the motor like this. This is kind of rusted, so we're not going to be able to get it perfect, but we should be able to improve it considerably. This is really like a miracle product. It cleans so well, so quickly, so easily. Now, ironically, it's not working very well right now, but that's because this is not dirt, this is rust, and you can't just clean off rust. Rust doesn't work that way. And this is kind of rusted inside here too, so this is going to be the same issue. So that's as good as that's going to get. It's a little bit better. This part you can't see, so I'm not too concerned about it. I'm more interested in cleaning up the other shell, which you can see from the back. This one. Now, it looks like this will need to be repainted if this is ever to look good again. That's fine. You know, I get a lot of comments when I do these restoration videos, and a very common comment is, why don't you use Retro Bright to fix the yellowed plastic? And it's really because I just don't care about it. You know, you have to find a balance between doing a good and thorough job and then just spending hours and hours and hours and hours per unit. And for me, where that kind of cuts off is a lot of these cosmetic details. Like, I'm not really going to enjoy the fan anymore if I repaint this motor shell. It's equally as nostalgic to me if it's, you know, kind of worn out and used, which is the way the ones were that we had, versus looking brand new. I have one that's new in the box. That one looks pristine. If I want to use a pristine one, I've got that one. These other ones, I just want to work. I want them to work perfectly. I enjoy the mechanical aspect of these projects. I like working on the bearings and the electrical components. I don't really enjoy fussing over cosmetics. I don't really enjoy painting. I don't enjoy soaking products in hair cleaner and whatever the heck else has to be done in the sunlight to try to reverse yellowing that's just going to happen again the first time you use it in a window. It's just not for me. So that's why I don't do that. That's why I stop where I do, because this is good enough for me to enjoy the fan. If you require your products to be de-yellowed, then you should focus on the cosmetic aspects. I don't. And since it's my project and I'm doing the work, this is the way it's going to come out. There's a lot of people that focus more on aesthetics. I focus more on mechanics. Now, if I can get something to look perfectly new very easily, like wiping down a wire with melamine foam for a couple of minutes, that'll do. That makes good sense to me. And that's what we're doing now. spot on there that's not coming clean, I'm just going to skip it and move on. There's just a couple spots in here that are really quite dirty. I don't know what that is, if that's dirt or some kind of a stain. Or a burn, maybe? That's weird. Yeah, I don't know what that is. If this doesn't take it off, like nothing does. This is just so powerful. And a little bit of cleanup on the plug here. And that's it. We'll call that clean. I'm not fussing with it anymore. We also have the blade. I forgot we've got to clean the blade still. And then we've got to clean off the handle, the switch, and that piece that goes around the switch. I never put the blades in the dishwasher. I don't think it would damage them necessarily, but the problem is you're heating up something that can potentially warp. It's just not worth the risk in my opinion. It's easy enough to wash a blade by hand that I don't think it makes sense to put it in the dishwasher. You know, parts like this, kind of the same thing. I haven't noticed any grills having negative effects from being in the dishwasher, but a handle, if this loses any integrity, it's already flaky as it is. I don't think it's worth the risk to make it potentially worse when it's easy enough to just clean it off by hand like we're going to do now. And same thing with the yellowing. Yes, this is horribly yellowed. I don't care. I'm not going to enjoy the fan anymore if it's stark white again. What I'm going to enjoy about the fan is if it runs properly and the motor's in good working order and, you know, all that kind of stuff is correct. So that's what I focus on. I wonder if this was stored outside. There's a lot of spider nests or something in here. I really don't like it. Gotta make sure we get all this out. I don't like bugs in the house. I am having difficult time getting this out. I might need to get a... I hate to get screwdrivers wet. I don't like to get tools wet, but I think I'm going to need one to reach down in here. I can't get the... I can't get this stupid dumb bugs thing out of here. Okay, I got the stupid dumb bugs thing out of there. This is what was in there. I hate that stuff. Okay, lastly, not lastly, we have the cabinet still. Yeah, this kind of has like an outdoor, filthy garage, filthy shed, filthy basement kind of residue on it. I wouldn't be surprised if this spent some time outside. Would explain the sun damage. So we got to be very careful with this, the cleaning up of this blade, because of the way it's starting to deteriorate. So it might be hard to believe, but I'm going to go even slower than usual to be extra careful. Now you'll see the back of the blade here is much more yellowed than the front, so the sun exposure to the fan was definitely from the back. So it's clean now after I wipe it down, but it doesn't look as good just because it's yellowed. And you know, one of the other reasons why I never bother with the de-yellowing process is that, from what I understand, it doesn't fix the integrity of the plastic. It's purely cosmetic. If it fixed the deterioration, I would be much more inclined to do it, but I don't believe that it does. I don't usually have this much difficulty getting into the areas here like this. Alright, that looks pretty good. Certainly much better than it did before. The last thing we need to clean is the frame. There's a stinking sticker on there, so we're going to remove that first. And the easiest way to do that is with heat. So we're going to take this, the heater, and plug this in here, and we're going to heat this up. And we're going to get that pretty hot, almost to the point where we can barely touch it, and that should soften up the adhesive on that sticker and allow us to remove the sticker very easily. This is particularly helpful with those pesky, irremovable stickers that the questionable Will thrift store tends to use on the fans and everything else they sell for that matter. Since this is metal, it should be easy. It's difficult on plastic stuff because it doesn't hold the heat well. Alright, let's see how we're looking here. Perfect. You can tell this is a thermal paper sticker because it started to discolor on the edges where it was getting hot. All right, let's get this frame cleaned up. Then all that's left to do is polish the shaft a little better, revarnish the motor, which is a quick process, and then reassemble. And we should have a fan that works like new. It's not going to look like new, but that's fine. It's not new. Looks like what it is. This is cleaning this up better than I expected. I thought this was going to be really junky, but actually cleaning up very nicely. There is some rust here, and those spots is we're not going to be able to fix with the melamine foam. That would have to be repainted, but again, I'm not too worried about that. Well, a couple rust spots on a box fan is not something I'm worried about. Now, all this filth that I don't want to see. We'll get that off. That's all rust, unfortunately. But it looks a lot better than it did. This, I think, was a tea bag that was stuck to the fan. I don't know what the heck that's about. That I'll probably have to get off with Goof Off or Google on, what the heck it is. Yeah, Google on, I think, is the one that's surface safe. the memory card filled up, so I'm not sure how much of that segment got recorded, but that's not a big deal. It wasn't much interesting going on. I've got the frame cleaned up now. It didn't come out very good. It really needs to be repainted, but that's fine. All the parts are clean, the blades, guards, handle, switch, etc. The last thing we need to do now is varnish the motor and clean it up a little bit more. Here's the stator. I'm going to take this outside to spray. I'm not going to film this part of the video because it's snowing out, so you know, with the camera to get all wet. But it's a very simple process. I'm going to put this wire through here so I have something to hold it while I spray it. And this is very, very simple. I just go through and I take this varnish. This is the Spray Off EL600 clear insulating varnish. It's clear, so it gives a nice shine to the windings. And I just spray a coating of it on this side, and I turn around and I spray a coating of it on the other side, and that's it. A very simple process. If you can use a spray can and you can use common sense, you can do this part of the process. It's not difficult. It does have to be done outside though, because the fumes from that spray are very, very powerful and very, very bad for the health. I got the motor varnished, and this process is also something of balance. In a perfect world, you would go through here and spray a cleaner on here, get this perfectly clean, get every last bit of dust off. Then you can heat it up for a while and dry it out, and then varnish it, and then heat it up again and dry it out. I don't have time for that. Yes, I probably varnish in some specks of dust here and there, but at the end of the day, this varnishing process that I just did is protecting the motor and preserving the longevity of the windings, and that's what I'm interested in. Alright, so it's sticky now because the varnish is wet, so I don't want to put it down on the table because it's going to have all the dust will stick to it that's on the table. In fact, I really need to remove this thing now because we're done with the messy part. Well, almost done anyways. So I'm going to sit this back in the, try to sit this back in the bottom shell now without putting it down on the table. Okay, now the motor is now varnished. You can see it's got some shine back to it now. And if you look real close, you can see those little specks of dust I was talking about. Yes, those specks of dust are now varnished on. They will be there indefinitely, but at least the motor is now secure. All those loose wires are not going to vibrate anymore. And this should last a lot longer now, or at least the chances of it lasting a lot longer have been significantly improved. So we're going to do one more thing before we reassemble, which is to polish the shaft a little more. And for that, we will turn it using this drill press. I like to wrap a, actually because this is a larger shaft, we might have to use a piece of paper, very thin piece of paper. I like to wrap a piece of paper around the shaft before I put it into the chuck so that it doesn't nick up the shaft here and then cause problems as we try to slide the bearing back on. So this should be all the way out. And then we'll close this. Oh no. Where is the key for this? Yeah, see, somebody else used the tool and put it somewhere else. I always stick it right here. Okay, I found it. It's not lost. It's just not where I normally put it. I better put this stinking fan off here. It's freezing in here. 67 degrees. What the heck? Daggone fan's making our wind chill probably down to 65. Alright. It's all wobbly, but I don't care. It is what it is. It don't matter. So we're going to use a little bit of this Simichrome polish, polishing the paste. And we already did some polishing, so there might not be too much to see here, but I have a feeling that there will still be some dirt to come off of here. Oh yeah. And the bottom is going to be a lot worse. I might have to do this 3 or 4 times because this bottom part was just awful. Wow, look at that. Holy cow.
Sounds like this drill press needs a servicing interval. Okay, the bearing surface is, or the shaft surface rather, is quite clean now. Very nice. Bearings will just glide right along that perfectly. Now all that's left is to add some oil into the bearings and reassemble. And then we should have a perfectly good working, very nostalgic box fan. And that was the snowplow that just went by. It is the snowing again. So we'll get to see the outdoor Christmas lights in the snow for a third time this year, which is pretty cool. Actually, I've been able to see it for a lot of days because it's been, snow has been staying because it's been so cold. That was dumb. Alright, this will, I'll just cancel that out. And we'll finish working on here though for the oiling part, in case we make a mess. So we're going to use Zoom Spout, the oil, which is paraffin based and rust and oxidation inhibited, non-gumming. That's very important to be non-gumming, non-detergent. This is good for fan motors, and if you want to use 3-in-1 oil instead, you need to use the blue can. The blue can is good for fan motors. That's why it has a picture of a fan right there in the back. The black can is not for fans. As you can see, there's no picture of a fan, so don't put this in a fan motor. So what we're going to do is we're going to add oil into this wicking material around the bearing. Now some people like to replace this wicking material. That's fine and good. I'm sure that offers good benefits. I don't have time for that. So I'm just going to reuse the material that's in there. Worst case scenario, my service interval to re-oil this comes up sooner. Now if you're also inclined, you could drill through here and add an oil port like on the older models, so you don't have to take it apart to oil it. That's worth doing probably, but we'll fill all these holes with this wicking material in there with oil. We'll get that nice and saturated on both the front and the back shell. And as long as this takes in the oil to a reasonable degree, this should last many, many hours of operation before it needs to be relubricated. Let's see how it's going to work. It's absorbing the oil nicely, so I don't feel like we need to replace it. Replacing it's perfectly good. It's a beneficial thing to do. I just don't have the desire to do it. That again is one of those items of balance to me that adds cost, that adds time, and I don't really have an objection to just oiling the fan a little bit more frequently. But quite honestly, I think that this material is still fine. You can see how many drops of oil it's absorbed. I don't think that this material is spoiled. It can spoil, and it does spoil. I don't think that this is spoiled. If it was spoiled, it wouldn't be taking the oil like this. Putting about 4 to 5 drops per hole. should be good there. Go and do the same thing in the back. This was totally dry. This has not been oiled in many, many years. Perhaps even never. It might have just been unfortunately greased instead, which made quite the mess, but we got it taken care of. Okay, that's good. We'll stop there. So now we got to put these washers back on here, these thrust washers. These are identical. It does not matter which one goes where. In fact, I oftentimes will reverse them because then the wear is taking place on the other side and it's like having a new one. These don't really have signs of wear on them. It's look pretty good still. You know, these motors can really handle quite a few hours of operation without having any trouble. The one that I had originally, which I still have, has got to have 20, 30, 40,000 hours on it by now. And we use that thing all the time in the 2000s. It was great. Okay, so we're going to take our freshly polished up, super clean shaft, and we'll put a drop of oil on here. That's what it's supposed to look like. Clear, clean oil, shiny silver shaft. I'll slip this in place. Turns freely. There's a coating of oil on the shaft itself. Put a drop or two around the bearing on the inside here, just to get a little coating on there. And drop this in place. Ah, there we go. Now it's turning freely. That's the way it's supposed to be. A little bit of oil in there again on the front, and then we'll stick this on there. And we'll add a little bit of oil in here. And now we want to make sure that we line up the screw holes. So, funny enough, these motors, the shells are actually the same on the front and back. There's a thing for the wire. So we'll match that up. And that will line up our holes properly. Okay, so now we'll take our motor screws, which I should have cleaned these off a little better than that, or I should have cleaned them off, period. I didn't clean them off at all. Take a couple seconds here to clean these off a little bit so we don't put old dust into a motor that we just cleaned. You want to put dirty old dust into a brand new motor. Okay, that's lined up nicely. That's lined up nicely. And these don't need to be ridiculously tight, just snug. I always say like 2-finger tight, and that's it. Click. Click. Okay, they're torqued evenly. Wow, that sure does look a lot better than it did before. Nice and clean now. The end of the shaft is still kind of dirty. I did spend a fair bit of time with the polish on there, but it was just so caked on it wasn't coming off. But that's okay, it's going to work good now. So we're going to add one more drop of oil to the front and back just for good measure. A little oil in there. Oil in there. Now you might find that it's kind of stiff. This one is kind of stiff. And so what we need to do is we got to take a screwdriver and smack the shaft in each and every direction. These are self-aligning bearings, and the shock of the whacking with the screwdriver will line them right up. And if they're aligned properly, they will glide nice and free. Sometimes they free right up, sometimes it's a little bit more tricky. It's also possible that the housing is a touch too tight if it doesn't free up, but now we're getting it. Sometimes it does take a little bit of force. And you got to try each and every direction until you get it right. That's pretty good now. That's running very free. I'm pretty content with that. So at this point, I think we are ready to put the motor back into the frame and reassemble the unit. And we'll get all this dirty stuff off. Get all this dirty stuff off the table, because now we're moving into a cleaner portion of the video. We need to give it a new pair of feet, because these are powerful enough that they blow over on carpet, even a medium. So I think that these very yellowed ones that I have in the cabinet will be a good match. Foot. Alright, so we'll begin by putting the motor in place. It goes like this. With the cord kind of at like 11 o'clock. Alright, let's take a quick break, and we're going to test it to make sure that the rotor did not get accidentally reversed or something weird like that. Make sure everything's working properly. So if this is working properly, the shaft should turn in this direction. And there should not be any sparks or flames. Okay, the shaft turned in the correct direction and there were no sparks or flames. So I think we're good. I'm not going to test the rest of the speeds. I have no reason to believe that it's not in working order. So now we got to route the wire back up and get the switch on. The wire goes like this, it folds and then goes up, and then it folds again, kind of at a wider angle, and then it goes like that. This sticky stuff is kind of sticky still. The guard will hold it in place. It's not a big deal. Could you put new glue on there if you wanted to? Of course. I don't care. This goes in here like this, and then it turns to lock in place. But I think that that's the wrong orientation. I think it needs to go like this. Yeah, I think it goes like that, such that the wire kind of folds under the switch and sits like this. That makes more sense with the way the cable management is set up. Yeah, that's definitely the way it goes. So then your lead wire here comes out through the top. I like to make sure that all these wires are pushed in as far as they can go. Not too much bare wire showing. And this comes down like this. And this slips in here. Okay, the wire's in place. Now the switch itself, which is a very risky operation because it's likely to break. Those old tabs tend to break. The knob itself has to go on first, and we need to make sure that it is in the correct orientation. So that if this is correct, that should be low. Now I'll check all three of the speeds. Low, medium, high. So now we can secure this in place. I'm going to start with the front and get that in position. And then I'm going to try to push this back as much as I can, and I was successful in getting that in place. I think that the lousy feel of this between 2 and 1 is not the switch itself, but rather the plastic interfering, and I don't want to mess with that to try to fix it because it's too risky for no reward. Okay, now we'll get the handle on. So with the handle, what needs to happen is you have to kind of bend the handle like this in order to get this tab to go underneath. Okay, we got one side in place. And the other side. Cool. So we got both the handle and the knob off and on. without any problems. That is shocking to me, especially considering how yellowed this is. Well, we're almost done. Let's put the blade on. I want to make sure this is dry in the center here, because if we lock moisture in there, it's going to rust the shaft. So I'm going to blast the center with some compressed air now. Okay. I feel like that's dry now. So align the shaft. There's a flat notch on the shaft, and there's a flat notch on the inside of this. They go together. That fit a little bit loose because we cleaned it, but it still fit on there well enough. And look at those bearings glide. What a difference from before to now. Incredible. All right, let's get these guards in place. I don't want to run this one without the guard just in case the blade happens to fly apart. I don't think that it will, but it is in stages of decay, and I don't want to take that chance. And yes, the guard's all warped. It was kind of warped before. It did get worse through the dishwasher, but once we put the screws in place and secure it down, you won't notice. And in a couple days, it'll take the correct shape again. And this is exactly why I don't put the blades in the dishwasher, because I think there's a chance that it could warp the blades. And speaking of warpage, someone did point out in the comments box that this blade is partially warped. And I agree with that. I think the blade is just so slightly warped backwards, but the pitch of the blades is not warped, which is interesting. So it should not have any, I don't think it'll have any performance issues. Okay, we're all good in the back. Now the only potential problem in the front here is if the guard is warped to the point where it touches the center of the blade. I've encountered that on other ones before I washed them, and I think that we're going to encounter that on this one. So we might have to kind of, I'm not sure how we're going to fix that. I might have to put it down on something overnight to kind of warp it backwards. I can fix that. I'm not worried about that. That's the least of the concerns. All right, let's take a closer look at it. A lot better than what we started with. Certainly that's a lot better than what we started with too. Nice and clean now. Freshly varnished, ready for probably decades more of reliable service. See right through the motor now, it's got plenty of airflow and cooling. I can't believe none of that broke during this whole operation. All right, let's test it out. Let's add these feet on here. Turn on microphone number 2 so we can get the startup sounds, which are pretty good on this model. Okay, microphone number 2 is on. Let's stick this right here. And we'll check with our kilowatts meter to make sure the power consumption is normal. Suspect it will be. Now, one more thing we can do. We can straighten out the plug. Prongs are all bent up and screwed up. Okay. Wow. Unbelievable. Runs like new. Very curious to see how the medium is going to work. And that is kind of touching the blade, so we'll have to see what we can do about that. That's 1.12 the amps, which is reasonable. 94 point, or nine, no, started that's wrong. 1.12 the amps, 94.6 the watts, and power factor at 0.72, which is all reasonable. See how these bearings are gliding freely. Very good. The medium. So the medium is not up to par, which is very typical with these Marco motors. I don't understand why that happens. I'm glad this one's not up to par. Well, okay. I'm glad and I'm not glad. I'm glad because some people were saying that when you revarnish the motor, it fixes the medium speed. That makes no sense. I did it once and it fixed it, and I was really convinced it was a coincidence. And this proves that was a coincidence because I revarnished the motor the same way I did the last one. It fixed the last one, didn't fix this one. So I'm glad we've ruled that off the table because that made no sense and it was bothering me that it didn't make any sense. That was coincidence. If you revarnish the motor and it fixes the medium, that's coincidence. So the medium is not working properly on this one, which is typical. 1.47 the amps, 128 the watts, and 0.74 power factor. I don't understand why the medium winding dies on these Marco motors, but it does. This one's not terrible. Some of them end up being even slower than low speed, which doesn't make any sense. It's kind of working. It should be working a lot faster than that. Now let's try the high. Now the bearings are in good shape now. Hopefully they stay that way. If it gums up again, we're going to have to burn the bearings. That's up to par. Low and high are normal, just the medium is screwed up, which is typical. That is 2.05 the amps, very reasonable. 183 the watts, very reasonable. Power factor .77, that's actually better than usual. And this is powerful. It's not 100%, the blade is a little bit messed up. Normally these have a very concentrated airstream. And this one, the air is kind of pushing all over the place, which would make sense for the blade being kind of bent backwards the way it is. But it's still whipping the air out like nobody's business. I really think that these were some of the most powerful plastic bladed box fans there ever were. More specifically, this configuration with the Marco motor, this pedal blade, the better, sturdier one, and the circular bar pattern, like seen on this Ultra Force here, that grill. When that grill's on one of these fans, or let's say this motor was in that fan, that I think is one of the most powerful plastic blade box fan configurations there ever was. Well, there we go. That's fixed. And it's running really nicely. I don't understand why the mediums do that on these Marco motors. This is extremely common for the medium to just not run up to spec after so many years. And it's odd because the power consumption is normal. It's not off the charts. It's not like the motor heats up a lot on medium. It seems content running this way, but it's not the normal spec. The low and the high are normal, so it doesn't make any sense. Well, that was a good project. I enjoyed that. Went from a complete, filthy, worthless disaster to something that's just about good as new, with the exception of the medium speed, which is a mystery I have not yet been able to solve. And that's not specific to this one. I've seen that on so many of these, and a lot of other collectors have reported the same issue. It seems like it might get better as it heats up. I have another one upstairs, or not upstairs anymore, but I have another one that definitely works better once it heats up. It was a premium model. Once the motor's up to operating temperature, the medium is pretty much normal, but it's slow on startup. It's not the case with low or high, so I don't think it's a bearing issue. I'll have to run this one for a while and see if the medium gets up to normal eventually. I feel like it's running faster than it was when I first started the video. Surprisingly, it's not that badly out of balance. Actually, in pretty reasonable balance, all things considered. The blade is so horribly out of clock. I can't believe it. It's not shaking all over the place. probably a good inch of clock discrepancy on there. Actually, can we look in there through the little hole here? Ah, yes. If I can keep the camera still enough. That would lead me to believe that this was sitting for an extended period of time, not in use, when the blades warp like that, you know, inconsistently. Alright, well, there we go. Another, well, this is not a late 90s, this is an early 00s 3733 saved.